Hello everybody and welcome to Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack, and if you guys are looking for PTCGO codes, make sure you check out the Potown store where you can get a sweet 5% discount on your order using code Omnipoke. Today I'm here taking a first impressions look at the new fusion mechanic. It was literally announced just over an hour ago. I've just woken up for work and spotted that these were out, so I wanted to do a quick first impressions video on some of these new cards, so apologise if I sound absolutely shattered because I really am. But yeah, so the Fusion Arts set has officially been revealed, which is going to be released on September the 24th in Japan. It's actually a long time away. Usually we only find out about sets around 6 weeks ahead of their release schedule, 4 to 6 weeks ahead of their release schedule. But it turns out we know about this one pretty much 2 months ahead of time, so it's going to be a long reveal season for this set. But we actually have a load of cards to look at right now. Just a quick peripheral bits. This set is basically focused on a new battle style named Fusion, and Mew VMAX is the star of the set. And basically, the official description states that Fusion Pokemon aren't bound by a specific battle style, but instead take strengths from every battle style in the world and fuse them into a new one. The Unstoppable Fusion battle style is all about synergy, focuses on strengthening your Pokemon whilst weakening your opponents at the same time. And honestly, some of these cards look really interesting, so let's dive straight into it with Mew V. We've got, we can't do the zoom anymore, oh well. Mew V is a Psychic type. We've already got one Mew V, but as you can see just here, it's pretty small, but you can also see from the text here, this is a Fusion Pokemon. Yeah, 180 HP, weak to Dark, all kind of, basically it's a weaker Calyrex so far. Energy Mix lets you search your deck for one energy and attach it to one of your Fusion Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. Every single Pokemon we look at today is a Fusion Pokemon, so this can power up any of them. Obviously you have to have Psychic Energy plus the energy type you want if you want to be powering up if you want to be powering up Pokemon other than Psychic types, which is a bit annoying, but they're similar to how Rapid Strike and Single Strike have their own version of Rainbow Energy or Aurora Energy or whatever. Fusion are getting a similar thing, so you also can attach Fusion Energy with this, which is interesting. And then Psycho Jump to 70 lets you shuffle this back into the deck. Again, not the greatest attack, but pretty good utility if needs be. I think this potentially, this first attack potentially could lead to some box style decks with a few of these attackers. And as you'll see when we look at the Mew VMAX momentarily, you can also use Mew as an attacker as well. So basically, in my mind, you're going to have lots of different Fusion Pokemon on your board, doing different things, hitting different weaknesses, and then you've also got Mew to copy them all as we get down to the Mew VMAX to be able to get some extra weaknesses in there. So yeah, Mew VMAX 310 HP, also a Fusion Pokemon of course. Weak to Dark, this is still scary, Eternatus is still good. And you can even play a Path to the Peak and Eterna will still one-shot you through a full bench. So the weakness is pretty scary, and I think that could be a fairly big issue, but Calyrex still sees play and is still fantastic, and we do always have Galarian Zapdos, so I don't think it's going to really hold it back. It's just something to note. Potentially Eternatus will be getting better, potentially this will be kept from the tippy top tier just because of the darkness weakness, but it hasn't really stopped Calyrex, so you can't really expect it too much. Crush Fusion for 2 colourless energy. Choose an attack on one of your bench Fusion Pokemon that uses this attack. So it's really important this is colourless energy because it means you don't have to run Psychic Energy. You don't get the utility of things like Energy Mix, but this is literally a splashable VMAX attacker in any Fusion deck, which is great because it means that you can hit different types for weakness. Like I say, there are plenty of different Fusion Pokemon we're gonna look at today, and all of them kind of are in that do enough damage to one-shot range if you have weakness. So this basically means any Psychic weak Pokemon you're going to always be able to deal with based on one of the different attacks you can see. So that's pretty good. We will look at a Hoopra momentarily, which may make this a little bit more redundant than it may seem. But I think regardless, we could definitely immediately, we're already thinking about kind of this Fusion Box deck, how to build Fusion Box, how to build Mew with various different attackers. Which is always going to be interesting. Box decks are some of my favourite style decks. these toolbox of attackers, so pretty cool. And then Max Miracle is 130, and damage from this attack isn't affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So again, just having a Shred style attack for this this deck is always going to be good. Shred is very important. This is kind of, it's not underwhelming, but it's not like 270 of the Eternituses and stuff like that. So just having the utility of Shred is going to be important for things like Decidueye and Zamazenta, but it's not groundbreaking. But at least you don't have to run these specific answers, which is cool. But yeah, so Cross Fusion I think is kind of the poster attack. Look at this Mew, by the way, brilliant art. It looks so happy. So yeah, we're going to be looking at different fusion style attackers, trying to basically build a box of them. One of the attackers, we do have Hooper V. Hooper gets a fusion Pokemon, 220 HP, Dark type, weak to Grass, as per usual these days. The ability Double Face lets this Pokemon be both Psychic and Dark type at once. And they are two fantastic types to be right now. Psychic hits all of the Rapid Strike Urshifus that are inevitably going to go up in value post-rotation, simply because Mew rotates, so the deck is just going to be significantly better. And Dark hits all of the Mews, all of the Calyrexes, all of that stuff. So these are two brilliant types to have, to be honest, and almost makes Cross Fusion redundant in terms of having a Psychic type attacker, because we have Hooper, which is a Psychic type attacker, and Shadow Impact does, for 2 Dark and a Colorless, does 170 and puts 3 damage counters on one of your Pokemon. So this 170 is enough to one-shot any VMAX right now, outside of things like Big Charm and stuff if you have a weakness on them. So it's almost redundant that the Mew exists because of this Hooper's ability, but there will be certain situations where Mew is better and you want to be using a different attack anyway. But yeah, this Hooper I think is brilliant, to be honest. We have things like Galarian Moltres to be able to get more energy on the board. We've seen that this engine works by being able to E-switch off. Obviously we lose things like Weavile in rotation, but I still think the E-switch engine has proved to be very good. So it's going to be unlikely you can probably set this up in a turn, but you can definitely set it up in 2 turns, and there will be certain situations where you can set one up in a turn, and because you're hitting 2 types for weakness, this could be devastating. It's pretty impressive, to be honest. As well as that, we also have that new Galarian Moltres that also accelerates energy, that you can E-switch off as well. So it actually doesn't seem terribly difficult to get this set up in 1 turn, which is pretty scary, to be honest. Yeah, just a really, really solid card, very efficient with the damage. 2 types basically doubles this card's value. These 3 damage counters I think are largely irrelevant in a lot of situations, because a lot of VMAX Pokemon do damage such that they overkill by 2 shots anyway. So things like Eternatus doing 240 or 270, they don't really care about these 3 counters because they're still going to have to go through them again. So yeah, it's a very, very efficient attacker. I think it's actually a very, very strong card, to be honest. Next up we have Genesect V, another fusion Pokemon. Metal type, HP of 190 and weak to fire. Again, it feels like every deck right now has an archetype. So all of these, like, you're always going to be hit for weakness by something relevant. So it doesn't scare me too much that this is weak to fire, because we've got things like Ice Rider that will check it anyway, and the fact that we then check Ice Rider is really cool. The ability is insane though. Fusion system, once during a turn, you may draw cards from your deck until you have a number of cards in your hand equal to the number of fusion Pokemon you have in play. So the ideal situation is we have a fusion Pokemon on the active and 5 fusion Pokemon on the bench. This reads, you may draw cards from your deck until you have 6 cards in hand, basically. So we already know that kind of ability is very strong. You obviously have to play some synergy with discarding your hand down and stuff like that, but that's not an issue. What is even more insane is this is a basic, and you can use multiple of this ability per turn. With the current translation, there could be any issues with the translation, but currently, in its current iteration, you can have 4 Genesect V on your board, which are basic Pokemon, and you can 4 times per turn draw until you have 6 cards in hand. That is insane card draw. That is actually bonkers card draw. Again, you have to be playing your cards down. You have to lower your hand size enough to be able to do so. But it's still very, very good in terms of if you can do that, because you're drawing upwards of maybe 8 cards more than usual per turn. Things like Calyrex can do that. We've seen things like decks like Zoroark drawing huge numbers of cards are insane. Magnezone Prime from back in the day, which had almost an identical ability, it just flat drew until you had 6, was crazy good. So this ability I think is bonkers, and I think this is the backbone of basically every single fusion deck. It doesn't matter that it's a metal type or anything, that you might not be playing metal Pokemon. Just having 2 or 3 of these on your bench is insane. It's drawing so many cards, and just the fact that they're basics is bonkers to me. So yeah, really, really good. Excuse me. And the fact that it's, again, it helps you draw out of things like Marnie and stuff is going to be really important, because obviously Marnie lowers you down to 4. This way, you're probably going to get a playable from a Marnie. So immediately you're probably drawing 2 to 3 cards off of Marnie. So Marnie is less of a disruptive tool now as well, which I think everyone wants, because it's not a particularly nice disruptive tool. So yeah, Fusion System I think is crazy. I think it's basically going to be the backbone of all of the Fusion decks, just because it's a basic that draws a nutty amount of cards. So yeah, really cool. And then Technoblast is 210 for 2 metal and a colourless. We actually have things like Metal Saucer that can power this up, which is pretty cool. I don't think you'd really ever run it in this style of Mew deck, because... Oh, sorry, in like this Hooper deck. You maybe would run it in this Mew deck if you wanted to use Mew as like a supplementary attacker. But this isn't too far off Zacian damage, and this probably can draw more cards than Zacian. It doesn't have the energy acceleration of Zacian, and it probably doesn't draw as many cards as Zacian on turn 1. But mid to late game, this is arguably just as good as Zacian, if not better, because you're doing a similar amount of damage. You have the same attack text. So you lose 20 damage basically, but you can use multiple of this ability per turn and draw, whereas Intrepid Sword ends your turn. So in the late game, Genesect is arguably better than Zacian, and Zacian is one of the best cards we've ever seen. So yeah, this Genesect is nuts. It's going to be the backbone of all of the fusion decks, I think, and it might even make other engines go to a fusion engine with just like their main attacker not being a fusion Pokemon, just because still drawing until you have 5 in hand isn't that bad, especially when you can do it 2 or 3 times a turn. So yeah, Genesect is crazy. I think it's an absolutely bonkers card. Next up we have Oricorio. Again, all of these Pokemon are fusion Pokemon. Fervent Lesson. As long as this Pokemon is in play, your fusion Pokemon take 20 less damage from your opponent's attacks. You can't apply more than 1 Fervent Lesson ability per turn. So basically, you can kind of see where we're going now. We have a lot of fusion Pokemon with these nice little abilities that you just pop on the bench, and when they're on the bench, you get to draw a card for basically each of them, which is crazy. It means that these kind of splashable attackers are more appealing, because normally things like this are pretty good, but you'd rather just have a spot for your draw Pokemon or consistency or something like that. But this arguably drawing a card every turn as well, or maybe even 2 cards every turn if you have a couple of Genesect out and you can use them both, also makes this really good. It means that the bench slot is less of a waste. Considering in the Genesect deck you may be more reluctant to run something like an Eldegoss or a Crobat engine, you do have that bench. You do have the bench space available to you for things like Oricorio, and there's a couple of other cards as well, to be able to actually have the space to put these down, because you're probably, potentially running less cards like Eldegoss and Crobat. So I actually think this is pretty cool. I don't know whether 20 damage is enough to make it relevant. Again, like I say, with the 3 counters on Hooper, 20 damage rarely will actually change things from a 2-shot to a 3-shot, or from a 1 to... But it might change some 1-shots to 2-shots, I guess. So this will kind of live or die on whether this 20 is relevant or not. But there's nothing really wrong with the card. It's just whether this number isn't big enough. But you can kind of see that we've got a different amount of attackers... Well, a different amount of bench sitters that can also kind of be attackers as well with Mew. So we have to basically look at all of these attacks as well, because Mew can copy them for 2 colourless energy. Passionate Drop lets you put 5 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon in any way. So that's a nice little sprinkle, if needs be, against some of the basic oh, sorry, like evolving basic decks, things like Sobbles and stuff. Again, just reminding you, and myself to be honest, this is 2 colorless energy, so you don't even need to be running the correct energy for these attacks. You can just literally run a Mew box and just have each of these different attacks and copy them all for 2 energy, which is going to be really good. Obviously, you're not hitting multiple weaknesses if you're not playing the energy types of these specific attacks, but maybe just being able to copy 210 damage for 2 energy is efficient enough. So yeah, really, really interesting. Next up we have a Clamperl. It's also a fusion Pokemon that evolves into a Huntail, which is a fusion Pokemon that has the Single Strike Jammer ability. As long as this Pokemon is in play, your opponent's Single Strike Pokemon require colorless more energy to use attacks. So as you can see, lots of little bench sitters that just go in and really try and disrupt the opponent. As you'll see with the Gorobas, there's also a Rapid Strike version of this. So these cards, again, will kind of live or die based on how important or how big Single Strike and Rapid Strike are in the format. I think rarely the Stage 1 commitment will be worth it, because in matches where you're not playing against a specific archetype, they are just dead cards. But because Clamperl is a fusion Pokemon, it still counts as kind of arguably a draw card for Genesect. So maybe there is enough reason to play them, just because even in the situations where they're dead in a game, they still draw a card. So yeah, really interesting stuff. There's Single Strike Jammer, which disrupting an extra energy can be annoying, because Single Strike has Houndoom. They probably can get around this fairly easily, but at the same time, having to commit an extra Houndoom as well as an extra 20 damage could be pretty relevant, just because they only have a finite amount of Single Strike energy that they can accelerate, and if they run out of those, then they have no acceleration anymore. So you are forcing more resources out of them. I just don't know whether this is worth it as a Stage 1, but maybe there will be enough bench and enough space in these decks to be able to play these techs, which is cool. Similarly, Gorobas has Rapid Strike Canceller, which says as long as this Pokemon is in play, your opponent's Rapid Strike Pokemon have no abilities. I actually think this one is a bit better, because this is more impactful in terms of resources, but I think this is probably more disruptive for things like Inteleon. Again, I don't know whether Inteleon existing is enough for this to see play. We do have a lot of Inteleon decks right now, in all fairness. Excuse me. There's probably also some other Rapid Strike abilities I can't think of right now, but Inteleon is the one that immediately sticks out to me. But I don't think you'd play this just to completely shut off Inteleon alone. Maybe you would. Maybe Inteleon becomes such an important part of the format that basically everyone's running it, so then all of a sudden no one get that extra damage. And the thing with this one as well is this is a bit more universal than the Single Strike Jammer, because everyone is like, you're not limited to a Rapid Strike deck to play an Inteleon package. So this is I think Gorobas is the one that will see play out of either of them, just because this stops more than just the Rapid Strike decks. It stops things like we've profiled things like Inteleonization. We've got Ice Rider Inteleon. Basically, Inteleon can go in everything. So maybe that enough is worth it. If you're playing against 60% of the field being Inteleon decks, stopping their abilities is pretty cool, though it doesn't stop things like Drizzile and stuff, so maybe not worth it overall. But yeah, definitely an interesting one, and I think it's far better than the Huntail for sure. Toxel and Toxtricity are also getting fusion Pokemon. Tox is basically just an evolving basic. It reduces 30, which is at least somewhat defensive. Toxtricity has the Max Downer ability. This ability only works if all of your Pokemon in play are fusion Pokemon. As long as this Pokemon is in play, the HP of your opponent's VMAX Pokemon is 30 less. That's pretty good, to be honest, because 30, yes, probably doesn't change things from a one-shot to a two-shot, or a two-shot to a one-shot, or a three-shot to a two-shot. But 2 Toxtricities, excuse me, 2 Toxtricities is 60 HP, and there's also a card later on that manipulates the damage of these fusion Pokemon. And all of a sudden, you can be one-shotting VMAXs with sort of one of these style attacks, one of these 210 style attacks. That's pretty crazy. Obviously, you have to get multiple Toxicities out. These are stage 1s that don't offer consistency. But a couple of Toxicities and maybe a couple of Genesects, and you kind of have your consistency. Then one spot in the active for your attacker and one spot on the bench for your backup attacker. It could happen. Minus 60 HP is pretty big. You basically have to read this as your attacks do 60 more damage to your opponent's VMAX Pokemon, and yeah, that would be pretty good. We have the single strike Embor that basically has a similar ability. Your attacks do 30 more damage, and that's what's seeing play. But that's a stage 2. This is a stage 1, and potentially that breakpoint is worth it. Obviously, this only works against VMAXs, but it looks like we're going into a very heavy VMAX meta, and I think this, unironically, could be an engine, or could see play here and there. There are, like I say, different. There is an item that we're going to look at later on that does manipulate damage from your fusion Pokemon. So that, in combination with this, could mean that you can be one-shotting VMAXs for 2 energy from turn 2. Potentially somewhat consistently, which is kind of scary. I'm glad this is on ability on a stage 1. It makes it not quite as oppressive as a basic, obviously, but it being a stage 1 means that it is worth playing around with at least, because if it was on stage 2 it just would not be worth it. So I feel like this is the perfect point for this card, which is pretty cool. Also, again, limits you to fusion Pokemon, which is fine. We're probably only playing fusion Pokemon in the deck anyway. But that really does mean you can't run things like Eldegoss or Crobat. Next up we have the Dragapolt line once again. Again, all of them fusion Pokemon. Dragapolt has Fusion Assault, which is 30 times the number of fusion Pokemon you have in play. Honestly, as a stage 1, as a basic, we had the Phalanx, which had Rapid Strikes. I think it was Rapid Strike Squad or something, which did 20 times your Rapid Strikes. Then we had the Urshifu, which did 20 plus 20 for your Rapid Strikes. Neither of those have seen play. This is a stage 2. It does have a plus 10 mod. And 180 is more relevant, because you can 2-shot into KOs, whereas 140 doesn't ever 2-shot into KOs, really. So 180 is way better than 140, but because this is a stage 2, I still think this isn't going to be good enough. Which is unfortunate, because you could run, there's a deck around playing fusion Pokemon in V and VMAX form, and you could argue there's a deck around playing fusion Pokemon in basic or in one prize form. But I don't think this is just, because this is a stage 2, I just don't think it's going to be good enough. It's not going to be quick enough. Things like Rapid Strike Urshifu will probably still overtake you, even though you're a Psychic type, just because they can snipe multiple Dreepies per turn. So yeah, really unfortunate that I think this is going to be held back because of stage 2. We've basically seen this attack with slightly different damage mods a couple of times on one prize Pokemon, and neither of which has worked. So pretty unfortunate, but not quite going to be good enough. Mellowetta has the Melodious Echo ability. Melodious? I'm not sure. 70 damage times the number of fusion energy attached to your Pokemon. So fusion energy, like I said, is basically an Aurora energy. We'll get to it later on. But basically, similar to how Houndoom can't accelerate impact energy, I would imagine this will only apply to exactly the card named Fusion Energy, and any other fusion energy with the fusion tag won't count. If they do count, that's a lot better, because this isn't capped at 280. But even when this is capped at 280, it's still pretty interesting. I don't think it's going to be consistent enough. You have to not be attaching your energy to your Mellowettas, because if they're attached to the Mellowettas, your Mellowettas are getting knocked out and then you're losing the energy. So you have to have attached full energy to your benched Pokemon, as well as 2 to this Mellowetta to be able to attack with them. You can arguably run a Calyrex engine to be able to power Mellowettas up in a turn, but you also have to have some kind of fusion Pokemon on your bench to store the energy, and then if that Pokemon gets gusted up, it cannot. You lose the energy. So it's a bit awkward. There is a card that we'll look at in a couple of minutes time that basically does accelerate fusion energy exclusively. So maybe that can help build up or get around the fact that you have to have these energy on the board already. But it seems a little bit too convoluted to be worth it. 280 damage is insane though for a 1-prize Pokemon. They've really pushed the boat with the 70 times. But yeah, because you're soft capped at 280, like I say, there are ways that we can manipulate damage. But you have to have all 4 energy in play, and they have to be, I think, realistically, probably on 4 separate targets, just to avoid being bossed and losing all of your damage in a turn. So there's a lot of things going right for this card. 280 damage, like I say, is nuts. But I think there's also a lot of things not quite aligning properly, which is a shame. But again, because of the boxy nature of fusion Pokemon, maybe there will be a way that this sees play. Maybe even just in the Mew deck, you just play this as a one-off, and late game when you've got all of your fusion energy down, you can just drop it, play some damage manipulation, and Melodious Echo for 280. So maybe as like an exclusive, exactly one-off, and exclusively the Mew deck, it's worth it, because you don't need to power this up specifically, you've already powered up the Mews, which is interesting. Smiggle has the Trash Sketch attack, which lets you choose 2 fusion trainers from your discard pile, show them to your opponent, put them into your hand. This is pretty scary in terms of resource regeneration. Luckily, it doesn't look like any of these fusion trainers are going to be like disruptive, so it's not a guru style effect. There are a couple of interesting ones, but they're not massively disruptive or anything, so that's good. It does open the door for basically a control deck if we ever do get some disruptive fusion trainers, but I would like to think they've learned their mistake and we won't be getting any disruption. Plus, this fusion mechanic, it seems to be focused on all-out attacking, so it'd be really weird to kind of weave in some trainers that would be disruptive as well. So yeah, I don't think that will happen, and that probably limits this card in general, just because it's too slow to get 2 trainers back unless you're trying to slow the game down, i.e. trying to be a control deck. So I think because this isn't a control deck, Smiggle probably won't see play. Onto the trainers, we have Elliss Sparkle. Choose up to 2 of your fusion Pokemon in play for each Pokemon you chose. Search your deck for fusion energy, attach it to that Pokemon, and then shuffle your deck. So this is potentially, this is the fusion energy by the way, this is potentially attaching 2 energy per turn on top of your usual amount, which is pretty good. The weird thing about this card is its net worth drops drastically the second you the second you use one. The second one is a lot worse, because if you ever draw a fusion energy, from that point on you don't get the full value, and once you've used the second one, the other 2 copies of this card, if you're playing 4, are completely worthless. So it's a really weird supporter where you don't particularly want to play 4, because 2 of them are always going to be dead weight in your deck, but you don't want to play a low amount because you want to be finding this as early as possible to get the energy acceleration as early as possible. So it's in a really weird spot. This is the perfect kind of supporter that you'd want to see in a format with something like a Lele or something. I would love it if we saw a Lele style effect. Without that, the supporter is obviously very strong, being able to attach 2 energy. I just don't know. It's difficult to kind of picture this deck currently. So I don't know whether it ever sees play over something like a Research or a Marnie or a Boss, because they are also so good. They don't attach energy, but we've seen that we can get away with different energy requirements, different acceleration techniques for many of these attackers. We have Saucer here, we have Moltres here, and as well as just having energy mix, we also just have the fact that this is 2 colorless energy, so we don't even need acceleration really, to be honest. So yeah, I don't know whether this is ever worth it. This is a card that really depends on how this deck is built and whether there are alternative draw options and stuff like that. But yeah, so pretty interesting stuff. It could be very, very good. 2 extra energy is obviously brilliant, but it's just whether this is worth it over something like a Research Engine, or whether you play them in tandem and just hope to draw these early on, and then have Researches and Marnies and stuff for the late game when these do no more. Maybe this is just like a 2-of in a regular Research Marnie Boss Engine, and just the games you draw them early, you high roll, and you get a couple of extra attachments. We'll have to wait and see. Next up, we have Chili, Silent, and Cress. search your deck for up to 3 fusion Pokemon, reveal them and put them into your hand, and shuffle your deck. So this is basically Brawly, but better because you can get evolved Pokemon, and you don't immediately have to put them to bench, so this is not limited by your bench size. Again, this may end up being a one-of. It's pretty slow. We don't have amazing... well, we do have very good ball search right now. The ball search we have is actually brilliant, but we don't have Calm, which makes Evo Incense our only VMAX search. So because of that, this can get VMAX Pokemon. So maybe this alone is a reason to play it just as like a one-of or something like that. I think currently it's probably too slow. Again, just the fact that we don't have a Lele or anything, plus this not being usable on turn 1, immediately drops it in value. But maybe when we move away, like this is in my mind the perfect kind of supporter. What I'm hoping they're doing is I'm really hoping they're setting up for the battle styles on meta to have a Lele style effect. We lose Research, Marnie, and Boss, so all of the aggressive supporters, and the game slows down, and we can use things like Chili, Silent, and Cress, and Elliss Sparkle, to be a bit more slow in our gameplay. So I think it's probably too slow at the moment because Research plus things like Quick Ball and stuff potentially find you this stuff just as easily, as well as drawing you bonus cards. But maybe, again, this is worth the space in specific iterations of the Fusion deck. And if not, this to me seems like a slower format card, and if they don't reprint things like Boss and Research, that looks to be the direction the format would go. So yeah, I don't think it's too impactful straight away, but when we get to post-row in like a year's time, maybe that's when this card sees light. We'll have to wait and see. Power Tablet is the item I mentioned earlier on. During this turn, your Fusion Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. This is triple plus power. This is Electro Power. We saw how good Electro Power was. We know how good Plus Power was. This isn't limited to one type. This is limited to one archetype, but this archetype has multiple types. So basically, any of your attacks can always two-shot a Pokemon that they're weak on. And they have weakness. Sorry, one-shot a Pokemon that they have weakness on, and sometimes even with a combination of Power Tablets, one-shot Pokemon they don't have weakness on, which is crazy. I think this is bonkers, just how good Electro Power was. Admittedly, it was a format where we had Jirachi, and Jirachi engines let you search for these when you needed them, or somewhat search for them when you needed them. But I don't think that takes away from how good this card is. Plus 120 damage during your game is very relevant, and there will be the backdoor combo opportunities of one-shots out of nowhere. So, yeah, this is... I don't think there's much more to say about this. I think this is crazy good. I don't see how this can't see play. Just 30 more damage is nuts. This is a Leon on a trainer card. It's crazy. So yeah, I know Leon isn't really seeing play right now, but that's because it's a supporter and we have such good supporters. We want a Boss, we want a Marnie. Turns out you can Boss and Marnie and Power Tablet and take KOs. So yeah, Power Tablet's nuts. And then finally, Fusion Energy. Again, pretty much identical to things like Impact and Spiral Energy. They can only be attached to a Fusion Pokemon, and it provides every type of energy, but only one at a time. The Pokemon this card is attached to isn't affected by abilities from your opponent's Pokemon. Very relevant, potentially. Things like Umbreon won't be able to gust it up. Things like Inteleon won't be able to ping it. All of these different abilities that we see, basically you can make your Pokemon immune from them now, which is pretty cool. At least in the Fusion deck, Fusion archetype. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I think, to be honest, this is probably just part of that deck anyway, just because it looks to be a somewhat toolbox deck. But even if it isn't, maybe just one or two of these, the same way we've seen things like Impact and Spiral Energy played in certain Single Strike and Rapid Strike decks. Just for that utility, in my opinion, of not being affected by abilities, could be pretty good. It's kind of like a Stealthy Hood, but also an attachment, so you're also progressing your attachments for turn as well, which is cool. So yeah, I think this is a really strong ability. Also with things like Elissa, you can target where you want these fusion energies, so your opponent immediately can't start to attack them and stuff like that. Well, with things like abilities and Inteleon's pings and Umbreon, gutting them up. This means that you can basically protect them early if you do find your Elsas early enough, which is cool. So yeah, I expect us to see, again, dependent on how many abilities are in the format, I think there are going to be a lot, unless we see some kind of ability lock. So because of that, I'm pretty sure this is certain to see some play, just basically because it's a Rainbow Energy, so it's never particularly a bad attachment, especially in this kind of toolbox archetype that they look to be pushing, as well as having the extra utility of being somewhat defensive as well, which is cool. So yeah, really interesting stuff. This is going to be on a November set, and there's a couple of other trademarks that they have announced that probably will tie into some of the other cards that make our November set. But yeah, this stuff looks really, really strong. They have not pulled any punches. I think Genesect is the card I'm most excited about, just because Fusion System, in my mind, unless this has been translated wrong, this is bonkers. Making a card comparable to Zacian is crazy, and I think this is somewhat comparable to Zacian for this deck exactly, where you also have different types and can basically use any attack you want, and you have Electro Power for basically every turn that you, well, for whenever you need it to be able to push these Pokemon into one-shots. Yeah, it seems very, very good, so I'm pretty excited. Have to wait and see how this actually goes down. But yeah, thanks for taking a look at these first impressions look at these cards. I'm pretty interested to see where they go with this. We probably won't see anything for another 2 or 3 weeks now, so we'll have to wait and see what comes next. But a very, very impressive first reveal for this fusion style mechanic. We'll have to wait and see whether it's just as good as Single Strike and Rapid Strike have been. But yeah, really cool stuff. Thanks so much for watching. I have been Jack from Omnipoke, and look forward to seeing you guys in another video. Cheers.